Hi, this is Sam Antonio with Liberty News Network, and I'm here at LPAC in Reno, Nevada. I'm here with Angela Keaton, who is the Director of Operations of antiwar.com. So Angela, thank you for joining us here in the booth.
Oh, thank you.
Good. How are you enjoying LPAC here?
I'm having an amazing time. It's wonderful to be gathered with so many freedom-loving people. And with many freedom-loving people, they tend to be peace-loving people,
yes,
too.
Yes, that is very true. Now let's get into antiwar.com, because just that name itself, people have a lot of negative connotations that you're anti-American. They don't understand that there is principled opposition to the warfare state. So let's talk about that, because as we know, some members of our audience and just people in general come from the neoconservative background, and they believe that war is good to defend America, defend our borders. But you guys there take a principled stance against it. Explain that.
Well, you talk about defend our country, defend our borders, and defense is very important.
Sure.
That defense, but there's a difference between defense and offense, or defense and protecting ourselves and seeking adventures overseas. So what we are opposed to is, well, what we're for is that we're for the Republic. What Bill Kaufman calls the Little America.
Yes.
The America that we're proud of, with our traditions of the Bill of Rights and the right to be basically left alone, smaller government, and those are traditions worth protecting and cherishing. And that's that to us is very important. But war and empire, particularly the building of an empire and what has to happen, destroys those values. Through occupation, through building of bases, and through when the United States engages in war, it's inevitable that men, women, children, elderly, basically, civilians are being killed.
Yes.
That is not part, I think, of the kind of freedom that the United States represents. I think that's a deviation from our values. And in a country like the U.S., where people are very, very proud of their faith, their religious traditions, it's not compatible with that. Mass murder can never be compatible with, with Christianity.
Sure.
I mean, just a straightforward statement. So for those of us who really do care and want to protect the American traditions and values, war must end.
Yes. Well, let's also clear some myths here and misunderstandings. Can you describe the difference between a non-interventionist foreign policy and being an isolationist? Are they one and the same, or are they different?
No. We're very ecumenical. At antiwar.com, we take, we gather people together, and we display the writings proudly of people from left to right, up, down, whatever their political positions are, as long as they're non-intervention. So I just want to make sure that you understand that that's kind of where we're starting from. But we do, and we're very proud of the staff is very proud of our roots in the libertarian tradition.
Sure.
And with that, it's not isolation, it's peace and prosperity, it's free trade, but non-intervention means we don't go antagonizing others. We certainly don't involve ourselves in the affairs of others. Like, for example, with humanitarian intervention that some liberals consider that's terribly important, we consider that interfering and meddling in other people's business, and we have yet to see a humanitarian intervention that doesn't cause death. So all the way around, we think that non-intervention is healthy. Isolation would be walling ourselves from the rest of the world.
Sure.
And certainly we're not doing that. In fact, we'd have better relations and we'd be less isolated in the world if we engage with people peacefully through trade as opposed to bombing them.
Yes. Well, and also too, to kind of follow up with that, the history of our nation has been non-interventionist. If you just look at the foundation of our republic, is always not to be intervening in other people's affairs. We've seen and read the writings of George Washington, and that's what you guys are doing there. You're continuing the tradition of the founding fathers, and so it's very pro-American to take that stance there. Now, you brought some books here. Let's share with our audience here. What do you have there?
Yes, and I'd love to share with the audience. This is called ComeHomeAmerica.us, and this is you can tell it's a very well-marked compendium. It's edited by Paul Buell, who was a professor at Brown, Bill Kaufman, George O'Neill, and Kevin Zeese. They're all from very different political traditions, and I think some writers that would be familiar to your audience, like Justin Raimondo, are displayed in here, but also side by side with people like Cindy Sheehan and Ralph Nader. And together, if you look at the cover, you see Ron Paul, Mark Twain, Martin Luther King, Jeanette Rankin, Smedley Butler, Robert Taft. I mean, this is a truly American tradition, and that's, like we said, you're saying being anti-American, we think we're being patriots.
Broad spectrum, yes. It's very patriotic. I mean, you got a broad spectrum of individuals there.
And Come Home America to us is really what we want. We want our fighting men and women to come back home. And that's, to us, the most supportive of the troops as well, that position. So I think this is a wonderful introduction for people who want to know more about where we're coming from. Another wonderful book, and something that I think would really, I mean, it's a real intellectual treat too, is We Who Dared Say No to War, American Anti-War Writings from 1812 to Now. It's edited by Murray Rothbard, who's a retired professor, and his wonderful contribution to this is, of course, the history of Mother's Day as a peaceful, motherhood and the things that we're kind of proud of as being a peaceful tradition. And a name that might be familiar to some of your audience, Tom Woods, who's they put this wonderful compendium together. I personally, this is one of my favorite airplane books because I want people to ask me about it on the plane, and it still brings tears to my eyes too when I read the essays in here.
That's great. A couple of years ago, there's a lot of issues that if you brought it up, you'd be labeled as anti-American, a radical, crazy, and I'm talking about in regards to ending the Fed, being opposed to unconstitutional wars overseas, but that's changed. It's changed through a lot of movements. It's changed through your website, but also because we have a spokesman of that, and that's namely Ron Paul. And we're hoping to see, that hopefully that he can continue that into the presidency. But if you go beyond that, Ron Paul now he's announced that he's retiring from his congressional seat. If he doesn't win the presidency, who would you see is going to continue the message of the non-interventionist foreign policy? Who would you be the spokesman? And what's going to happen to the movement if Ron Paul's not on the national scene anymore? Is the movement still going to be viable? Or are we still going to have a message to get that out?
Antiwar.com's perspective, and we love Dr. Paul, but we don't endorse candidates. So we tend to step back a little bit from electoral politics. But you say who's replacing him? Is that Ron Paul, is a very healthy, spry man for mid-70s. So I think in terms of peace activism, I think we're going to see him around for at least. I think there's a plenty of time, that he's still going to be on the scene, educating people about peace and why it's good and healthy and creates wonderful things like free markets and the abundance that we have in this country.
And again, getting back to antiwar.com, you were influenced by the writings and by the persona of Murray Rothbard. Maybe you can describe to our audience about Murray Rothbard, because a lot of people, they're now finally understanding about Austrian economics. They're hearing these names like von Mises, but Rothbard is right up there, and people are not familiar with them. Maybe you can give a little nutshell
but they
about
will
him
be.
and how he's influenced, and how the founders of antiwar.com were influenced by Murray Rothbard.
Well, there's a wonderful, rich history there. Our webmaster Eric Garris and our editorial director Justin Raimondo were very, very active with Dr. Rothbard in the Libertarian Party. They were the radical caucus too, in fact, that make sure that the Libertarian Party stayed within its roots. But Rothbard's probably my fearless prediction is it'll be obviously remembered as one of the most important historian, philosopher, economist, theorists of the 20th century. He just isn't as well known yet because we're just now kind of understanding how peace and prosperity and non-aggression, voluntary interaction on all of our parts, that's the way of the future. So I think you're going to be hearing a lot more about his ideas and his teachings. But basically the most important thing, though, to him and his ideas were war is that fundamental issue, because of all the things the state does, the United States government specifically, war is that, it's the combination of the ultimate socialism with the most terrifying violence. The Pentagon being a very large welfare program, and the warfare welfare state is not doing. That's not, I hate this term, but not sustainable. It's inevitable that that's going to be declining. The world, logic and reason can't come out of warfare welfare. That's not the normal way, the natural way people interact with each other. So things are changing, and you're going to be hearing more about these ideas.
And to follow up, I think Rothbard's his influence and his teachings was kind of lost because he came out and had principles of opposition to the Vietnam War, but his voice got kind of lost with all these other organizations and other voices in there. But it's funny because we're sitting here in Reno, Nevada, and a few people who know Murray Rothbard, he was on the faculty of University of Nevada, Las Vegas, which we're north of it here, but we do have roots here in Nevada. Now, I really want to get into this because I think the momentum is shifting now. Ron Paul's been taking a lot of beating in regards to, and he has not changed his stance, and I'm just using it as an example of a person who's now put the message on the national scene, is looking into unconstitutional wars, bringing the troops home, and actually that is more of a peaceful solution here. A lot of establishment Republicans, neoconservatives, look at that as anti-American, not supporting the troops and what have you. What have you done in regards to bringing that message about and trying to explain to people that this is really the best solution? This is actually a pro-American solution to bring the troops home. This is something that's historical, something in our nation's history. How are you changing that? Are you getting active with Facebook or just doing speeches?
What's really important is that we don't spend a lot of time in like libertarian or old right echo chambers. Is that we do a lot of outreach.
Good.
And one of the first areas though, but where we've actually had good acceptance, of course, is just reaching out to people, just ordinary conservatives who are interested in fiscal responsibility. Yes. And I start with things like, do you know how much the wars cost? And of course, there's a great sites like costofwar.org yes. and other sites where people can learn that. But it's really, really important, especially with like Tea Party people who are yes. very concerned about not just their own pocketbook, but the nation's pocketbook and their children's futures and their own Social Security and the various things that they're very concerned about. What happens next is that we let people know just how much the bases cost, how much it costs to support different wars, and they are wars of occupation, which of course are not constitutional. I mean, it's not just either.
Sure.
So basically expressing it in a way that people understand very practically how much the wars cost, making sure that people understand clearly what the missions are. Like I ask people, what's the mission in Afghanistan?
Sure.
How do you know you've won? And that causes people to think a little bit like, oh, maybe George Bush and Barack Obama haven't been scrupulously honest with us about their desires, their wants, their needs. So we can question, that, people are very, very concerned. You keep mentioning anti-Americanism and
yes.
people's patriotism and questioning. But the fact is, patriots are, it's their duty to question people
That's
like George
correct.
Bush and Barack Obama. They're servants of the people, and they are not serving us by endless warfare.
Great, and I like your answer. You're trying to go outside the comfort zone, outside the libertarian circles to reach out to other people. So speaking of that, let's close up this interview. Where can people reach you? Because your website has some of the greatest writings on the web. Where can they find you at your website? Where can they find you if you're on Facebook or Twitter?
We're everywhere. It's antiwar.com. On Twitter, we're antiwarcom, antiwar2, antiwar news. Facebook, we have we have quite a presence there. Also, some of us at the staff of antiwar.com are volunteers for a site called comehomeamerica.us.
Okay.
Which is just regular people against war and empire.
Great.
No transpartisan, no extra ideology. We stick strictly to that issue.
Wonderful. Angela, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you so much.
This is Sam Antonio with Liberty News Network, signing out at LPAC here in Reno, Nevada.